Call to order the City of Burlington's Board of Finance on Monday, July 13th, 2026 p.m. at 2026 at 5:01 p.m. There's something wrong there. And our first item is the agenda. Is there a motion on the agenda?
We got the agenda.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Travers. Thank you. I have two in the room, Sarah, so don't worry about making motions unless it gets real quiet all of a sudden. I need a second, okay? Great. Any discussion on the agenda before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. On to our second item, which is our public forum for the Board of Finance. Is our practice to go in the room first to any members of the public here to address the board, and then we'll go online. I see all my staff here, so we'll go online. And I think I saw former City Councilor Sharon Busher. So give us a moment, Sharon, and then the floor will be yours. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Two items. One has to do with the Burlington Electric battery storage. And because the financials are confidential, I'm just trying to figure out, and the communication was very clear, although I am clueless as to really what battery storage is, but I don't need to really know that. It's part of the power supply. And there's a reference in the communication saying that because of the financials being confidential, et cetera, that the impact won't be until the impact won't be until FY28. It's not because they're confidential, but the impact won't be until FY28 and so on the budget. And so I couldn't figure out how you would decide if this was a significant impact, if this was the right thing to do, 5 years versus 20 years, and without those financials. So I was hoping, and I sent a communication to Catherine, and I now realize that she's I believe still on vacation, and that was my fault. I apologize on that. But I was hoping that the Board of Finance actually got some of that information in another format, so they would have that to determine the impact in the future. So that's number one. So I couldn't wrap my head around this, and maybe it's such a small part of the budget, it's really nothing to worry about. But because I didn't know enough, I was concerned. The second thing is I did send all of you a series of emails that I had on the Conservation Board's request to use Legacy Fund to acquire the acquisition of the Auer property. And I'm in support of that, but because it's going to be part of Winooski Valley Park District, which is regional, not Burlington, and Burlington voters, it's our money. I wanted to be assured that there was some kind of contingency, some kind of attachment saying that the uses would protect the rare species, both animal and plant, provide adequate buffers, and have access, but limit access where the ecosystem is fragile at the mouth of the river. And I'm hoping that that will be part of this overall acquisition. So that was what I was trying to communicate to you. And I didn't do a really great job tonight either, but I'm hoping that there will be something that will respect the voters' decision on how to use this money and what we want, what we expect from open space. So thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Anyone else online who'd like to address the Board of Finance?
Other. There was somebody, but they left.
Okay.
So I'm not seeing any.
Okay, seeing no one else here to address the Board of Finance, I will close public forum. Then we'll move on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
To adopt the consent agenda.
Moved by Councilor Travers. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Barlow. Any discussion on the consent agenda before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. On to our deliberative agenda, and our first item is with, Department of Permanent Inspections and Parks Recreation.
Yeah, Dan, can you go to the? Yep.
Okay, so Dan, the item is 4.1, the Auer family boathouse property acquisition as part of the conservation legacy funding request, formerly with the Department of Public Permanent Inspections. Scott Hudson is here for, but also Dan Cahill. There's Dan. Hi. I don't know why. There you are. And either one of you can kick us off.
So Dan, I'm happy to provide a brief overview and you can hop in. I think one of them Park District is also a remote. Yep. Fabulous. So we have plan A, B, and C. Perfect. So we're like. So this is a acquisition request from the Conservation Legacy Fund. As you probably surmised, the Auer family Boathouse is far north end of North Avenue Extension. On the west side, it's not been used for a number of years now since Charlie passed away. It's a beautiful location, but it also has significant development limitations. There's no municipal wastewater shortage out there, which is a substantial limiting factor. It's also mostly in the lakeshore flood zone, so it gets wet, as we all know. The structure there has been significantly damaged over the years. It's not in great shape, but it also has significant ecological value, and it's in a premium location for a community recreational asset right there at the confluence of the river, the lake, and bike path access. So we're in the due diligence period right now. The Park District has made an offer that's been accepted. Total number is $960,000. The request from the Legacy Fund is $340,000. I believe the number is 29% of the overall ask. This has been to Parks and Conservation Board as required. Both boards have supported it. There are a number of open space plan criteria that this checks the boxes for: ecologically, wildlife, resilience, floodwater, etc. I'm not going to sit here and read it, but there being that these two bodies look at those criteria when we get an acquisition request for the Legacy Fund. This would be an example of an acquisition that is held by an entity other than the city. Two other examples that come to mind is Rock Point was conserved with Legacy Fund monies in part. And so was the piece of Centennial Woods behind co-housing owned by UPM, and Legacy Fund monies were used for that as well. So there is precedent. The activities that occur out here or could occur out here, I will defer to Dan and Nick Warner. It's important to outline ahead of time what we want, and by we, I mean the property owner as well as the community, because those need to be allowed for in the conservation easement. With that, Dan, anything you care to add?
Great overview, Scott. I think one piece that I would add, just to add another property example to legacy funds being used for an entity, non-city entity, right around the bend of the river is the River's End Marina project that Winooski Valley is the owner of that parcel. And so this would be actually a really similar project to that one. And then just one more piece to answer Sharon's question while it's fresh. Part of that due diligence process, well, if we were to get through the due diligence process, Vermont Housing and Conservation Board would be one of the holders of the easements, and Lake Champlain Land Trust, I believe, is the other. Both entities a part of the interim management plan development process would be ecological assessment, and the conservation easement would most certainly and definitely support any of the ecological findings and protect those. So I'll check there for now, turn it over to Nick. And thank you all for having me remotely.
Nick, you're on mute, but
Sorry about that. I think Dan does the best job of tying things in terms of the project and what the city's needs and priorities are. So if if you ask me those questions, I'll mostly refer back to Dan, but this is a project we've been working on pretty diligently for the last few years. And we're at the culmination of our due diligence. So in fairness to everyone, we haven't completed that process. And also in fairness to the city attorney, the city hasn't had their opportunity to review the property and all that. But in terms of our funding and our investigation of the property and so forth, it's going quite well. And I'm just very thankful to Dan for his assistance. And I'm here mostly to answer questions. And so if anyone has any questions or concerns.
great. Thank you, Nick, Dan, and
Yeah.
Scott. So opening up for discussion by the board or questions. Councilor Barlow.
Yeah, thank you. I'm supportive of this, I believe. I did have some questions about the uses on the property. When Charlie ran the Boathouse there was a small sort of a store where people could buy drinks and candy. Would this preclude something like that from being reestablished? And I think there's also some boat storage there. Wondering if that might be opportunities for community boat storage there.
The answer is yes and maybe. I mean, we have to build enough flexibility into the site so that things can evolve over time. And we're right in the midst of trying to figure out what those criteria are. And that's going to be a very public document that everyone's going to be able to share and have input on. But there's a lot of limitations to the site currently. The access road is not up to par. It's not an accepted city street. And the site has been severely impacted by flooding and erosion. The initial plan is to clean up the site and do an assessment on the building and look at options for the building and create a very robust access from the bike path. And Dan, could you jump in on the bike path side?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. You'll see in the request that 300,000 of it is for the Winooski Valley's acquisition, and we've put a contingency of 40,000 from Parks as a request to support any of the assessment work or other capital costs that might come along with creating safe and accessible connection from the site. And there's we haven't done any full assessments yet, but that is a placeholder for some of the funds that we could anticipate needing to make that connection.
I guess I would just suggest that as part of the discussions and diligence, if there's easements that are needed, that we provide for that possibility, because I think the community would be very interested in that. It was a beloved spot along the bike path there in the northern end of the Burlington section. And it would be very cool to reestablish that if we could in some way.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Any other questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Carpenter.
I just want to reiterate what Councilor Barlow said. It is a beloved spot. I think the ability to stop and have a water or a popsicle was just a good point in the bike path. So if there's a way to do that, I think it will be important to the community.
I think there's some very clear criteria by which we manage parks.
Yeah.
And the primary one is free public access along with conserving the site. And This one is very unique in that we need to build in upfront the ability to have temporary structures, the ability to get boats in and out of the water, the ability to bring power and water to the site. What I'm being really careful, first of all, is we're right in the middle of due diligence. So that's why I'm hesitant and nervous about speaking too much about it. But it's clear, we think it's clear the access road currently is not really an access road. So realistically, bringing it back to the level of use that it was before would be very challenging at best. So initially, it's going to be a bike path access. And we're going to really focus on making that a very welcoming and easy access down to the site.
And I did mean bike path access. I think, you know, not vehicular, but I think a lot of people use the path, stop there before the bridge and just like to sit, and it's a great rest stop. So on the bike path.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, is there a motion? Counselor Travers.
Vote to approve and recommend the council approve the use of $340,000 from the Conservation Legacy Fund for acquisition of the Auer family boathouse parcel at 3181 North Avenue.
Counselor Travers, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Barlow. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, team. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving right along. Item
Thank you.
4.2, thank you.
Thank
Is
you.
battery storage approval with our Burlington Electric Department. On up, team.
I just don't want you share as well.
Thanks. If you could also put on the themes
Or if it's currently down,
Oh, well,
but you might now that you're,
he was having a little trouble.
oh, there you go. Yeah.
I will try to share again here. Our slides. Well, good afternoon to the board and the mayor. Darren Springer, joined by Emily Stevens-Wheelock and James Gibbons, who's online with us. Very excited to be here to present this battery storage power purchase agreement to the Board of Finance and City Council this evening, following consideration and unanimous recommendation at the Electric Commission on Wednesday of last week. I will just mention briefly before we jump into the battery storage details that I included as well in response to two requests. A memo in the packet that details all of the work that Burlington Electric has done relative to Resolution 7.6 2023. This storage power purchase agreement at the McNeil site is actually responsive to lines 112 through 114, I believe, in that resolution. And we've done a bunch of other work on the other items as well. So hopefully that's helpful context. We'll go ahead and jump into the proposal. These slides, as well as a memo and draft term sheet, are all included in the material. So this project stems from an RFP first issued in December of 2024, and then an amended RFP issued in May of 2025. The amendment being to respond to potential tariff impacts and changes in the federal incentive environment based on the new federal administration. We had 9 respondents, and we selected the lowest priced respondent, which is Kearsarge Energy out of Boston, Massachusetts. After reviewing contract terms for the other leading respondent and evaluating 2 proposals that were the leading proposals. This is for a 5 megawatt battery storage unit that can dispatch up to 20 megawatt hours. So for context, if we were in a peak period, you could essentially put 5 megawatts of output for 4 hours continuously onto the grid during a peak time. During our most recent Defeat the Peak effort, which was successful, we had around 400 kilowatts of response. So this dramatically increases our potential capabilities when it comes to peak periods. BED is looking at what's called full tolling. So we get to control the timing and reasons for dispatch and receive all the values from dispatching the battery. We've negotiated for what's called 2 maximum daily round trips. So you could charge and discharge the battery twice in a given day. and we can do up to 365 round trips per year, so one on average per year. The effort here would be to reduce not only our peak during the ISO New England peak, but also monthly transmission peaks, all of which can potentially save money for our customers. We also might look at doing what's called arbitrage, so charging the battery when it's cheaper and discharging it when it's higher prices. There might be ancillary services or other services, other markets that we could seek to participate in. The battery would be sited at McNeil, subject to final discussions with the joint owners. I'll show you where we're thinking about siting it on the next slide. This would be for a 20-year agreement with options for extension for 5-year terms up to a total of 35 years. Just for context, we've had a history at VED of doing long-term stably priced contracts for renewable resources. The South 40 solar project in the New North End, that was a 25-year agreement. Georgia Mountain Wind was a 25-year agreement. So we've had some history of doing long-term stably priced agreements in the past. We would not own this system. This would be Kearsarge owning, permitting, developing, financing, maintaining, guaranteeing performance of the system, and decommissioning the system at the end of life. We might seek an option to purchase within the contract, but this would mainly be a power purchase agreement where we're essentially leasing the ability to use the system, not owning the system. Here is a map of the McNeil site, and at the top you can see where the yellow square rectangle, I should say, is our ash pit, which is an already disturbed site where we've had ash collection that's just to the left of our wood yard and of the area where firefighters do training at the McNeil station. It's possible we might find a better interconnection point or a lower cost interconnection point at McNeil, but at the moment this is the spot where we think is best from an interconnect standpoint to put the battery, just for context. James, I'm going to ask if you want to detail these two 5- and 20-year tolling cases.
Sure. We look at both a 5- and a 20-year period analysis. We look at the 5-year because we view the front end benefits to be far more certain, the longer term benefits to be far less certain because of potential changes in market rules, potential changes in market structures. What we see here is that the 5-year tolling, when you compare the cost of the battery to what we would call the value stack, which is the sources of value it would receive, it is a positive case against both the base case and the high case of the input variables. So in other words, we project transmission costs at low base and high cases. We project capacity at low base and high cases, and energy likewise at low base and high. So the cost of the asset compares favorably against base and high cases of those costs and is close to break even against the low case. When you look at the 20-year tolling arrangement, you see it's more or less break even. It's actually a little bit short in the base case. It's positive in the high case, and it's negative in the low case. We are not terribly, or we meaning me, I'm not terribly worried about that because I don't believe that the values of batteries have been fully established. I believe that there will be significant new value streams created for batteries in the 20-year period to recognize their critical nature in balancing intermittent and renewable resources with the grid loads. In other words, you can't move to ever increasing demand for renewable resources without addressing the storage problem. And right now, there's really no specific market that provides battery storage with a value stream. It's getting values by affecting things like reducing your peak load and things like that, not by balancing your energy needs.
Thanks,
So
James.
that's how we would look at that graph.
The other point, maybe just to offer, if you could, on the 20-year, just a moment on the duration, the conservative modeling.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Apologize for not doing that, Darren. We took a very conservative view of the 20-year forecast. To utilize the value of the battery, you need to predict when those critical times will be. In other words, when will the ISO peak hour be, and when will the Vermont peak hours be each month? And you don't know those until after the fact. So it is a prediction exercise. It's not like you're told tomorrow will be the peak day. You have to forecast that. As more people deploy batteries, we think that they will become harder and harder for individual people to predict those peak hours. So we have made a fairly heavy reduction over time in the value of battery capability. And that would either be reflected by using all 4 hours and reducing the chance of getting it right and predicting the peak correctly, or what you can do with a battery is instead of discharging it at 5 megawatts, you can discharge it at 2.5 megawatts for 8 hours. Well, that would increase your probability of getting the peak time right, but would reduce how much you received for a benefit at the peak time. So we're modeling either of those cases, and we are dropping the battery value to about 15% of what it is today over the 20-year period. So again, that's a very aggressive D-rate. That may be pessimistic, but we'd rather be conservative on the value side if we can.
Very much, James. And moving to the next slide, just to kind of walk through some of the risks and benefits, some of which we've touched on. James just touched on really the difficulty of predicting peaks over time. So we have duration within the model. Market values could change certainly, or market rules could change. Having full tolling helps us mitigate that risk to some extent. And we have the responsibility for timing this correctly. So we think that's better than giving that responsibility to a third party, but we recognize there's a risk with that. On the plus side, 5 megawatts battery storage, by far the most significant that we'll have access to in our service territory, as I mentioned. It provides potential new revenue stream access at the regional level. I was just at the American Public Power Conference. We heard from MWEC, which is the Massachusetts Joint Action Agency for Municipal Utilities there. They're procuring, I think it was something like 250 megawatts of battery storage, with the view that there's going to be additional revenue streams going forward. So we're not the only ones who are looking at that view. Certainly the McNeil location furthers our energy innovation concept for McNeil, building on the UVM Solar Test Center, Village Hydroponics Indoor Agriculture Facility. This would be another opportunity to innovate at McNeil, consistent with Resolution 7.6 and the Valerity report that was issued just last year. And battery storage deployed here should, all things equal, marginally reduce the region's need for fossil fuel peaker plants when we have peak events. And we do have a provision within the term sheet that gives some protection if there's an event of defective discharge during a peak event. So that's a benefit as well. And then last slide, James, if you want to talk through the what we call the tornado chart here.
Yeah, it's a tornado chart, which is a wonderful way of saying it happens to look sort of kind of like a type of tornado if you stack it this way. It is showing the effect on the 20-year net present value of power costs of either having the battery or not having the battery, and which variables it affects the most to have the battery or not have the battery. So a reduction between the blue and the orange bars represents a reduction in risk. If the top end moves down, it means that the possible maximum cost has been reduced. If the bottom end moves up, it means you've exposed yourself to a little bit of increased minimum cost. So if you look at the overall, you see a reduction in risk and a narrowing of both the high end and low end cases for our net present value of power costs, with the biggest effect being on the capacity cost and the transmission cost. It has less effect on energy. So it's really just a way of looking about what variables matter, and that's why you see us looking at the stacked values from capacity, transmission, and energy. They're the value streams that matter the most.
Thanks, James. And I will stop sharing. I'm always mindful of time at these meetings, but we're happy to answer questions if there are.
Appreciate that, Darren. Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Councilor Newbeezer's hand came up first, then Councilor Carpenter, and then we'll go to Councilor Travers. And I am reminding folks we have probably about 5 to 7 minutes. We have a few other items we have to get to, hopefully by 6 o'clock.
Sweet, thank you. I'm wondering if you could speak to it. One, I appreciate this so much, and I do find it really, really exciting. I think this is a huge step forward in terms of this whole conversation around McNeil and how do we use this site differently and further reduce carbon emissions. So I just wanted to say thank you. And I feel like the peaker plant problem is like one of maybe the most challenging in general. So to me, this is really, really significant progress around meeting our climate goals and further reducing our emissions. I guess I'm wondering if you could give us a better idea, and you already spoke to it a bit in the presentation, around, you know, how do you see this, or what's sort of the estimates on what will this displace in terms of, you know, we've got the oil turbine at the waterfront, we've got McNeil, you know, if I'm not misunderstanding, that we use as sort of a peaker plant to keep costs low. Yeah. And so I'm wondering like how we can think about that more clearly. And then in the presentation, you said, going off that, you said that this reduces the region's need around around using peaker plants.
Right.
Peak hours rather, and do we mean Burlington? Do we mean like Chittenden County, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm happy to elaborate on all of that. So the battery itself doesn't necessarily displace any existing resource that we have, but it will add additional capability that we have to contribute less essentially to the region's peak, which marginally means that at the regional level, there will be less of a need, less of a demand for those types of peaker plants. I want to caution that Burlington are only 6% or so of Vermont's overall electric use, and Vermont's only about 4% of the region's energy use during these peak times. So we're relatively small within a relatively small state. So I certainly don't want to overstate the impact, but for us, if you think about it, Burlington's average hourly load is around 37 megawatts, and our average peak during the summertime is going to be 60 to 65 megawatts. So if you're able to take 5 megawatts of that off the board, you're making a pretty substantial contribution on the Burlington side to our own peak reduction. I would mention with our own peaker facility, we had moved previously to B20 biodiesel blend. We are actively working to move towards R99, which is renewable diesel, to get that plant off of fossil fuels essentially entirely. We'll keep everyone updated on that effort. So this is not necessarily going to change our own need for our own resources, but it will contribute to the region's efforts in those regards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Carpenter.
Oh.
Councilor Carpenter, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I just, Councilor's Newby's questions were well thought, and I think answered most of the issues I was concerned about.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Travers.
Yeah, thanks. A lot of new information to get my head around here as someone who's not well versed in your all space. I'm wondering, can you confirm for me, to the extent we talk about comparing the cost of this to other tolling arrangements, or 5-year tolling arrangement or 20-year tolling arrangement? What for these batteries, who are our tolling arrangements currently with? What are those assumptions based off of?
So we don't actually have any tolling arrangements currently. What we were comparing, when we say tolling, it's essentially a lease. Think of it as a lease price.
Yeah.
And it gives us full access to the battery. So the tolling payment essentially is that cost bar in those graphs. And then we're looking at both a low, a base, and then a high assumption in terms of the benefit. So how much peak reduction do we get? How much monthly and annual reductions do we get? And how many other value streams do we get? And what are the price assumptions around those essentially? That gives us, similar to how we do with a hydro contract, for example, we'll look at what do we think the energy markets are going to be, low, base, and high, and how does our cost compare to those? So it's not replacing or comparing any existing tolling agreement to a current. It's more saying what's the least cost of this battery on an NPV basis compared to the potential for low base and high case values. And as James mentioned, the 20-year reflects a fairly conservative look at the benefits, whereas the 5-year is a little more predictable and knowable.
Okay, and that explains the difference with the 20-year arrangement as the conservative estimates from sort of 5+ years out.
Correct.
Okay.
And we are not modeling any hypothetical value streams. We have not included like hypothetical new markets for values for batteries or anything like that in the 20-year analysis. We've simply derated it to be conservative.
Okay. And on the risk side of things, right? If I know battery technology in the grand scheme of things is relatively new, we begin to rely on this during peak moments and the technology fails for whatever reason. What do we do then, right?
Yep, we had a similar question in a way at the commission. And actually James did some analysis of what if you missed an ISO peak, for example, what would the value be at 5 megawatts? I think he came up with around 257,000 at current values, just to give you a context for that event. As I mentioned, we do have some protection built into the contract around this. So that we would obviously activate that provision. But this essentially is a new capability that we don't currently have. So we're really balancing it against the cost that we would pay. I do think on the risk standpoint, one thing I didn't mention is a lot of utilities are moving in this direction. Obviously, we're a little bit of a laggard in purposeful way because the economics haven't really looked as good for us in the past. We did an RFP for storage back in 2017 and decided we shouldn't advance it based on the economics at the time. Neighboring utilities like Green Mountain Power have been a real leader in the space. They have a different business case because of the rural nature of their service territory. They get some outage reduction benefits or resiliency benefits, generator replacement benefits that we don't necessarily count on here in Burlington, given we're compact service territory, underground partially. So there is a risk though, in my mind, if we don't do something and we end up being one of the last utilities to get battery storage and everyone else is shifting the peak costs onto those who aren't participating, we would potentially be in a negative place there. So we feel like this is a kind of a moderate step in essentially in putting ourselves into this space. We're not committing for 100% of our potential peak reduction. So if the technology evolves and changes, there's no reason we can't seek additional storage capabilities in the future. This isn't like a one shot and we're done forever type of thing. It's more of a putting our toe pretty well in the water, but not totally jumping in.
And perhaps most importantly, the seller is obligated to maintain the battery capacity. So if it ceased to be able to perform, we would cease to have an obligation to pay. If
Awesome.
we had actually owned the battery and the software vendor went, out of business and you couldn't get access to the source code and couldn't control it, you would have a problem. We won't have that. We will either be receiving a value in terms of the ability to shift load, or we will not be paying at a basic level.
And thank you. Be the sole purchaser of power from Kearsarge.
You mean in this arrangement?
Yes.
Or, so just to be clear, we're having conversations with the joint owners at McNeil. We've offered that if they want to join us in this arrangement, that they'd be welcome to, in which case we would share equally in the costs and the benefits from the battery. If they're not interested in doing so, then we would just execute per the materials a site license similar to what we did with the UVM Solar Test Center. So it's conceivable that they would decide to join us, in which case we would welcome that. And if they're not interested, it's also fine. We can proceed with the full 5 megawatts.
Darren, can I just add a quick, we wouldn't share equally. We would be entitled to 50%. It wouldn't be 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. BED would have 50% proportionate to our ownership of the McNeil site. So that you solve a license and lease problem if everyone who is owning the site is sharing in the battery relative to their ownership in the site.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I am mindful of what time it is. We have a number of other items. So is anyone willing and able to make a motion? Councilor Barlow.
I will make the motion as recommended on Civic Alert.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Travers. Any further brief discussion before I call the question? Great. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Moving on to CEDO, and thank you, James, and our Community Justice Center, which is actually CCC, something Bill mentioned. Okay, welcome with the Vermont Network Subrecipient Agreement, item 4.3.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, and the acronym or the short speak for our new name, we're just making triple CJC. Or just CJC in this county is all we have to say for now. So this is we're 1.5 years into a 5-year grant with the network. The network holds the grant. This is with the Federal Office on Violence Against Women. This is a sub-agreement. We've for the last 1.5 years, we've been a partner in this grant, and this is just continuing it now that because the Office on Violence Against Women needed to approve their budget, they got through the first year and a bit, and now they're making it more formal for the remainder of the grant. So this is a little over $200,000 coming for this remainder of the grant period. And in this fiscal year, it would be used primarily to fund 50% of one of our victim services specialists, as well as some supervisor time. But again, the network holds the grant, so we're just doing a sub-grant agreement. Great.
Motions.
The only question that I have, right, because this is federal, right, and I know the federal government has fortunately been in the business here recently of trying to attach some conditions that could be adverse to some of the ways in which we've done business historically. So as you look at this potential grant funding, do you in any way see any risks and some of the conditions that they've attached to it and your ability to continue to do the good work that you've historically been doing?
Yeah, amazingly, I'm kind of shocked, given the number of kind of flag words attached to this grant. Not only is it around using restorative justice or alternative justice, but it's also specifically for immigrant, refugee, and asylum seeker survivors. And so the grant partners are representative of those groups. The Office on Violence Against Women has been extremely careful from the inception of this grant. It's a pilot, and they have been very, very mindful of all the language needed for the grant itself, as well as trainings and discussion groups or any time that it's a pilot nationally. There's a number of grantees for this. So I guess my short answer is no. I have no concerns based on what we have seen coming from the OVW and through the network. The network is also very sensitive to this and hasn't been alarmed by anything that's been asked of us or any kind of dancing around any potential, principles and values that we hold to do the work.
Okay, anything else? Is there a motion? Counselor Carpenter?
I would move that we support this based on the language in Civic Clerk.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Counselor Barlow, noting that there are just one action. No, just one. So it's looking forward to, but there's just one motion to be made here. Any further questions before we vote?
I would just note, I saw it at one point in time, but as I look at Civic Clerk right now, I actually do not see a copy of the subrecipient agreement on there. So I'm comfortable with our proceeding here, but just for the sake of the record, something seems to have fallen off of our agenda, and I do not see it as an attachment to Civic Clerk as it stands right now.
I believe it's one big packet.
Is it in the packet?
Usually when CGC submits things, they do.
Okay, sorry, I take it back. Sorry, it looked like it was the checklist, and sometimes that's a separate attachment. Okay, all right,
Yep.
got it. Thank you.
Great. All right, I'm going to call the question. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Rachel. Moving right along, item 4.4 is request for approval to execute a contract with APS Environmental Services for flow monitoring services, our water resources team, EPW. Welcome.
Hey, yes, I'm Megan Moyer, Division Director, and Ashley Valenti, Water Resources Engineer at Flow Metering. Captain. Ashley will tell you a little bit more. We know the costs they look substantial, but having this data is imperative for a system like ours, where we have the combined sewer system, and also where Burlington is thankfully, looking at expanding housing so much, which does put pressure on these collection systems. So we need to have very detailed level of information for hydraulic and hydrologic models. And the only way to really do it is to physically put meters into our system to make sure we're collecting actual data and not just relying entirely on uncalibrated models. So you don't have any other details, but
no, so I actually presented similarly to Tuke, same information, and that was to get the approval to actually put a new contract, request for proposals out. So we did that, and there was some additional questions from other vendors, but ADS ultimately was the sole bidder. They are our current flow metering contractor, so in good faith, they have less equipment even though we are currently not under contract with them, which has been great. So we are looking to extend our current or create a new 5-year contract, both for our existing equipment, as well as our intent is to expand our flow metering program, specifically to help evaluate future developments, both in the north end, additional in the south end, as well as in our main collection plant. So that's why you'll see kind of some pretty high level or high numbers of, yearly proposed spending with regards to this flow metering, because we've proposed to kind of extend our hydrologic model, both from outside of our main plant into our additional north plant systems, given the proposed developments and future locations of step up there. So we have requested to execute the 5-year contract with the maximum limiting amount to continue our program.
And so some portion of that, if you look at the permanent flow metering program, there are sites that we have really no choice. The state requires us to monitor and be able to report exactly how much combined sewer overflow went out. So there's some portion of the contract that's sort of mandatory.
So it's approximately 50% of the contract equates to that spending that we have to have as part of our LTCP and our 1272 consent order. So about 50% of our contract would go towards that. The additional 50% is our what we call our roving meters, or our meters that we kind of hotshot here and there depending on our needs on a systems yearly basis. We only propose to do them in our wet weather seasons, so it's April to November. So we get a little bit of a funding decrease in the winter months, but then we go back.
Questions or comments? Motions? Council Barlow,
I will make the motion as recommended, Civic Clerk.
thank you. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Travers. Any further discussion before we vote on item 4.4? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, item 4.5 is a resolution authorization for $1,790,706 step 3.
Each other. Contact.
Water resources on water resources.
So the loan from the Vermont Clean Water State Revolving Fund and engineering services contract with VHB Incorporated for $103,400 for the Manhattan Stormwater Outfall Rehabilitation Project, Water Resources.
I have Monica Ingalls here, another water resources engineer, who actually has been the one that has gotten this project a little bit off the back burner. As you all likely know, we do have a system of an outfall system, many outfalls where separate stormwater goes directly to water bodies. We've done a lot of assessments, and we do have a number of them that are in disrepair. We have been trying to be more proactive with these projects, but frankly, a lot of wastewater, drinking water needs sometimes take the front burner, and this one has had periodic stalls and whatnot, but it is back on track. We have had previous approvals from the council for initial or earlier estimates about what the project would cost. And this is kind of just bringing it up to current day year standards.
Yeah, so like Megan was saying, the previous approval for this project and the construction amount that was associated with it is based on 2021 costs. And so as part of picking up the project and pushing it forward to be able to construct it, we got an updated cost estimate from our engineers, which was an increase of about $500,000 between which is to be expected with inflation. And then the increase in the contract amount with our engineers is because of the amount of time between the 2021 design and 2025. There were statutes of limitations on our wetland permits. So we had done delineations that needed to be completed, and then in that time, the Army Corps of Engineers 404 permits, which is for wetlands, had updated a lot of their requirements. And so there were new requirements that weren't expected. So there was increased efforts from our design engineers to make sure that we were up to the current standards. So then the outfall project is to replace 3 outfalls along Manhattan Drive. I forgot to mention where this was located. But
Sort of the northwest corner of like 127, where it intersects with like Park, where it turns into Park Street.
Yeah.
Part of the.
Yeah, it's the Interville wetlands down there. There's 3 outfalls that discharge into those wetlands that have had historical erosion, gullying happening, and the pipes are failing. So the intent with this project is to replace the end of those pipes and provide armoring on the slope, since it's a lot of really steep sandy soils, which are likely to erode. So add some armoring, some plunge pools to kind of dissipate the flow as it enters into the wetland, and repair those, like I said, that historical gullying happening.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilor Burrow.
Yes, thank you. I'm supportive of this, but I did have a question. Are any of these three outfalls responsible for the erosion that you had sort of at the termination of like North Champlain Street there? There was a few years back, there was.
Oh, that's a different, so that is a different outfall that fell apart. So this is on the other side of 127.
Okay.
So could be similar if we, like, it's still an important project because every year and every storm event, things can sometimes sort of continue to unravel, which is why we can't just leave this forever. But it's that geology of that steep sandy slope that, like, if stuff starts to go, it's gonna go.
No, understood.
Yeah.
So it wasn't related to that because I'm wondering a lot of engineering work went into that.
No, that one is still holding that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good news.
Happy to take you for a walk down that slope. Like, it was my first 2 weeks on the job, I think. Got to go look at that.
Any other questions or comments before we vote? Is there a motion?
Motion as.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Councilor Partlow. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Travers. Any other comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to our last item, to get caught up. Go team. All right, and in 4.6 is a resolution regarding our ratification of the tentative agreement and authorization to execute the collective bargaining agreement between the city of Burlington and AFSCME for a 2-year contract. For HR director, Megan is here. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, very pleased to be here. I feel like this contract that we're bringing forward really provided, strength within the membership, which is nice to see on their side, and also was mindful of the financial budget on the city side. I've updated you along the way through I believe 2 executive sessions, but pleased to bring this forward only because, this is our largest union. And so AFSCME members is approximately around 300 members across the city. We've talked about that before, how AFSCME members sit in the majority of our departments, which also make negotiating the contract a little bit more interesting. There's, different key components that matter differently to the departments, but we focused a lot on health insurance is always key for us. The COLAs, of course, we've discussed before, the retirement pension, and we fell in line with where the budget was prepared for fiscal year 27. But we also really focused on some improvements, I would say, for the members themselves, mechanisms to help their communication amongst themselves, providing them an opportunity to have a new orientation amongst their members when they're hired, and HR is going to support them through that on a monthly basis. Giving them an opportunity to hold a meeting amongst their members to improve their communication. We've increased some clothing allowances where the members need that, but not solely for all 300. So we were mindful again of the budget, but compensating those members that are out in the streets, in the traffic department, in the water department, where they're maybe need more additional clothing than others due to the regular wear and tear that they might experience. We made improvements to their reimbursement for their safety glasses. So what seemed like minor negotiations, but all in all, I think they were beneficial for the members, and happy members are happy employees. So looking forward to bringing this forward.
Thank you, Lynn. Questions by the board on this item? Councilor Travers.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, for all of your work on this and for the updates that you provided along the way. I will be supportive of this contract this evening. I think as we look towards the next bargaining cycle, one item that I would like the city to consider is including a member or members of the city council as part of the city's marketing team. I think that there could be some benefits to members of the council being on the team and they're at the table. It avoids, I think we should continue the practice if you're continuing to come in and update the full council, but I think that there would be a lot of value in are actually being there at the table along with the city's team. So but just ask moving forward that you or the administration consider that for future contract cycles. Thank you.
Appreciate your support.
Other comments or questions? Okay.
Mayor, I'm sorry, just as a side note, I am getting messages that this is totally unrelated. That the doors to City Hall are locked at the moment, and I'm wondering whether or not there's anyone, sorry, Lisa, be large.
So we'll go figure that out for us.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to know. Okay. Back to our item on the AFSCME ratification. Any other comments or questions or motion?
I take the action indicated on the report.
Councilor Travers, is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Barlow. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Upstairs. And with that, friends, we not only caught up, gave ourselves 3 minutes.
Wow.
There is no further, I was stressing there for a minute. There is no further business with the Board of Finance. So I will adjourn the meeting at 5:57.
Recording stopped.